June 15th, 2021. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 8:30 in the morning. A frantic voice breaks through the emergency line. "Someone broke into our house. I've been shot. My family has been shot. I need help immediately." The dispatcher stays calm, asking questions. The caller, a 20-year-old named Alexander Jackson, describes an intruder. A masked man, all black clothing. A home invasion in broad daylight in one of Cedar Rapids' most affluent neighborhoods. When officers arrive at the dead-end street, they expect to find a burglary gone wrong. What they discover instead becomes the most shocking triple homicide their community has seen in over 30 years. Inside the Jackson family home, 3 people lie motionless. Jan Jackson, the father, shot 5 times. Melissa Jackson, the mother, found upstairs with fatal head injuries. Sabrina Jackson, the 19-year-old daughter, discovered in her bedroom, her life taken by gunfire. Only one family member survives, Alexander Jackson himself, with a gunshot wound to his foot. Here's what made this case terrifying from the very beginning. Every door and window in the Jackson home was locked, every single one, except for one basement door at the back of the house. The home had surveillance cameras positioned around the exterior, capturing every angle. Yet not a single camera showed anyone entering or leaving that morning. The murder weapon? A .22 caliber rifle that belonged to the Jackson family. More specifically, it belonged to Alexander himself. This wasn't just any gun. It was a unique model that required specific knowledge to load and reload. Even trained law enforcement officers had to watch a YouTube video to figure out how to operate it. The investigators searched the neighborhood with K9 units. They interviewed construction workers nearby. They checked for fingerprints, DNA, disturbed trails, anything that would indicate another person had been there. Nothing. No evidence of an intruder. No signs of theft. No items missing from the home. Inside the house, everything appeared eerily normal. A puzzle sat undisturbed on a table, not a single piece out of place. No furniture was overturned. No signs of struggle in most rooms. Just blood, bodies, and a rifle lying next to Jan Jackson's body. Alexander Jackson seemed like the last person who could commit such crimes. He was an Eagle Scout, taught values of truth and knowledge. He played flute in his high school band. His sister Sabrina played the oboe. They came from what appeared to be a quiet, close-knit family. No criminal record, no history of violence, no documented mental health issues. John worked in IT. Melissa was a retired photographer. They kept to themselves in their affluent community. From the outside, they looked like the perfect American family. But in the emergency room, as doctors treated Alexander's foot wound, something felt wrong to investigators. His demeanor was off. He showed little emotion. When asked about his family, his responses felt rehearsed. "I love my family. I love my parents and my sister. You may not believe me, but I love them." There was no raw emotion, no tears, just calm statements repeated over and over. How does a masked intruder enter a home in broad daylight in an affluent neighborhood without being seen? How does this intruder know exactly where a uniquely complex rifle is stored? How does he figure out how to load and reload a weapon that even police officers struggle with? Why does he shoot 3 family members in different rooms but leave the 4th alive with only a foot injury? Why does he leave the murder weapon behind? And most disturbing of all, if Alexander Jackson was the sole survivor, the only witness to this terrible crime, why did his story keep changing? At 8:30 a.m. on June 15th, 2021, the emergency dispatcher received Alexander's call. His voice sounded distressed. He claimed he'd been shot. His father had been shot. He described an intruder who had broken in through the back door. "Did you get a look at them?" the dispatcher asked. "No," Alexander replied. "Can you tell if it was a man or a woman?" "A man, I think." The description was vague. No specific features. No details about clothing besides black. No hair color. No age estimate. Just a man in black. The dispatcher kept asking questions, trying to keep Alexander on the line, trying to get more information. Where was his sister? Where was his mother? Alexander said his sister was in her bedroom. He mentioned his mother and father were there too. "How long ago did this happen?" the dispatcher asked. "I don't know. 10 minutes ago, maybe." When police arrived at the scene, confusion immediately set in. They rang the doorbell, no answer. They went to the back of the house. The back door was open. All the window shades were drawn. They couldn't see inside. At first, they wondered if this was a swatting call, a false emergency designed to provoke a police response. It happened sometimes. People making fake calls to waste law enforcement resources. But as officers entered the home, weapons drawn, moving cautiously from room to room, they realized this was horrifyingly real. In the living room, Jan Jackson lay on the floor. A rifle rested beside him. Blood everywhere. He wasn't breathing. Officers called out, announcing their presence. "Police department, sound off if you're here." They heard Alexander's voice from downstairs. "Down here." They found him near his father's body, holding his foot. "Who's this down here?" an officer asked, gesturing to Jan. "My dad," Alexander said. "What happened?" "He came down. There was a man. The man shot him." As officers continued their protective sweep, the scope of the tragedy became clear. Sabrina Jackson, 19 years old, was found in her bedroom on the main floor. She had been shot twice. Both rounds had caused fatal injuries. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, they found Melissa Jackson. She had been shot twice as well, once near her left eye and once in the head. Both wounds pierced her brain. She lay partially off the bed. 3 family members gone. 1 survivor. This wasn't a burglary. This wasn't a random home invasion. This was a massacre. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, Alexander started talking. He seemed almost casual about it. "I ran into him," he said. "The man." "You ran into him?" the paramedic asked. "Yeah, I charged at him. We fought over the gun. That's how I got shot in the foot." At the hospital, detectives questioned him further. Alexander explained that he'd been sleeping on the screened-in porch with his dog. He woke up to gunshots. He went inside and saw his father on the floor with a man standing over him, holding the family rifle. "Did he have a mask on?" they asked. "Yes, one of those ski masks." "Did you see his hair?" "No." "His shoes?" "Black, I think." The description remained frustratingly vague. But something else caught investigators' attention. Alexander claimed he'd been sleeping outside on the porch all night without his cell phone. He said the gunshots woke him around 8:30 a.m. But when investigators checked his phone records, they found something interesting. His phone had been active on social media at 6 a.m., more than 2 hours before the supposed intruder arrived. "Who was using your phone at 6 a.m.? they asked. Maybe me. I don't know. I don't remember." "But how could you use it at 6 if you were asleep until 8? Alexander had no answer. As crime scene investigators processed the Jackson home, the physical evidence began telling a very different story than Alexander's account. The K9 unit found no scent trail leading away from the house, no footprints in the surrounding area, no disturbed vegetation, no signs anyone had fled the scene. Inside the home, investigators found no fingerprints from unknown individuals, no DNA evidence suggesting a stranger had been there. Nothing was missing or stolen. The home showed no signs of forced entry beyond that one unlocked basement door. Most tellingly, all the exterior surveillance cameras were operational and recording that morning. All except one. The camera that would have captured the back door area where Alexander claimed the intruder entered and escaped. The blood evidence was particularly revealing. There was a large puddle of blood in Alexander's bedroom, near the corner of his bed. There was another significant blood deposit on the couch near the stairs. But Alexander's bloody footprints only went in one direction, out of his bedroom, never into it. The investigators realized something crucial. Alexander had shot himself in the foot while in his bedroom, then walked out, creating that trail of bloody footprints before placing the rifle next to his father's body. Back at the hospital, detectives confronted Alexander with the evidence. "Alex, the reality is there's no evidence that anyone else was at your house," they told him. "There was a guy in my house," Alexander insisted. "Do you want our report to reflect that there was a guy in your house that there's no video of, never showing up or leaving? Do you want us to put that down? Or do you want to give us some sort of explanation that makes sense?" Alexander stuck to his story, but detectives pressed harder. They pointed out that the murder weapon required specific knowledge to load. It wasn't the kind of gun someone could just pick up and use. Even trained officers had trouble with it. They explained that the K9 units found no trace of another person, that construction workers in the area saw no one, that the surveillance cameras captured nothing. "You know that somebody harmed your family," they said. "And you know who harmed your family?" "No," Alexander said. "Yeah, you do." "No. The person that harmed your family was you." "It's not me. I would never." Investigators tried to understand why. What could drive a 20-year-old Eagle Scout to end the lives of his entire family? They learned that Alexander had dropped out of college. He had no job and only $30 to his name. His father, Jan, had been pressuring him, telling him he needed to find employment or he'd have to move out. "Your dad wanted you to get a job, right?" they asked. "I guess he wanted me to show more effort," Alexander admitted. "Did you have serious problems with him?" "I mean, he wanted me to do better." They discovered some family tensions. Alexander and his father were reportedly very conservative. Sabrina, according to her journals, was very liberal. There had been arguments about politics. But was that enough? Was financial pressure enough? Family disagreements about politics. It didn't seem to add up to a motive for such horrific violence. After more than 7 hours of interrogation, Alexander never wavered from his core claim. An intruder did this, not him. But the evidence told a different story entirely. Despite his denials, Alexander Jackson was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree homicide. The charges alleged he had deliberately ended the lives of his mother, father, and sister. For a year and a half, the case wound through the legal system. Cedar Rapids, a community that hadn't seen a triple homicide in over 3 decades, struggled to comprehend what had happened. How could someone who seemed so normal, so accomplished, do something so terrible? When the trial began, prosecutors laid out their evidence methodically. They presented the 911 call, noting how vague Alexander's descriptions were, how he couldn't provide any useful details about the supposed intruder. They showed the surveillance footage, or rather, the lack of it. Every camera was working except the one that would have caught the intruder. They demonstrated how the rifle worked, showing the jury that it required specific knowledge to load and reload. This wasn't a weapon someone could grab and immediately use effectively. They presented the blood evidence, showing how Alexander's footprints only went in one direction, out of his room, not into it. How the blood pattern indicated he shot himself in his own bedroom. They revealed the phone records proving Alexander was awake hours before he claimed to be. They brought forward forensic experts who found no evidence of any other person being in that home during the time of the crimes. The person responsible for the deaths of Sabrina Jackson, Jan Jackson, and Melissa Jackson was their own family member. The defendant, prosecutors told the jury. Alexander's defense team argued that investigators had tunnel vision. They claimed police decided Alexander was guilty within 35 minutes and never seriously looked for other suspects. They pointed out that officers interrogated Alexander for over 7 hours, even though some had never even been to the crime scene yet. They highlighted an unidentified fingerprint found on the rifle, suggesting it could belong to another person. Alexander Jackson never wavered, his attorney argued. He told officers over 13 different ways that it was not him. The defense suggested that charging Alexander was simply the easiest route for officers, that there were holes in the investigation, that things could have been done differently, done better. They emphasized that Alexander had no criminal record, no history of violence, no documented mental health problems. How could such a person commit such terrible acts? After days of testimony, the case went to the jury. For 5.5 hours, 12 citizens deliberated. They reviewed the evidence. They considered the testimony. They weighed the prosecution's case against the defense's arguments. When they returned to the courtroom, Alexander Jackson showed no emotion. We, the jury, find the defendant Alexander Jackson guilty of the offense of first-degree homicide, the foreperson announced. Guilty on all 3 counts. Alexander's expression didn't change. No tears, no reaction. The same emotionless demeanor he'd shown throughout. Before sentencing, Alexander's defense team filed a motion for a new trial, arguing insufficient evidence and a flawed investigation. The motion was denied. Less than 2 months after the verdict, Alexander Jackson faced the judge for sentencing. This set of crimes shook this community to its core, the judge stated. Mr. Jackson is adjudicated guilty of 3 counts of first-degree homicide. In each count, he is sentenced to life with no possibility of parole. 3 life sentences. No chance of freedom. The prosecutor, also an Eagle Scout, reflected. You're taught values and ethics to live by. The Eagle Scout badge has 2 stars indicating truth and knowledge. The truth Alex was telling wasn't the truth. In all my career, I've never prosecuted a triple homicide of family members by someone who was supposed to love and cherish them. An absolute tragedy, inexplicable and senseless. Today, Alexander Jackson remains imprisoned for life. 3 guilty verdicts were obtained. Justice was served legally. But one question haunts everyone. Why? Investigators found no clear motive. Financial pressure, family disagreements, insufficient explanations for such violence. If inheritance was the motive, why not just target the parents? The case files contain no confession, no explanation, no breakdown revealing his reasons. This case reminds us that tragedy can strike in places we least expect, even within our own families. If this story impacted you, share it to raise awareness about recognizing warning signs of violence. Subscribe to stay informed about true crime cases that teach us to stay vigilant. Together, we can work toward preventing future tragedies by understanding what happened in the past.